With no further ado, the Encyclopedia Show.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Encyclopedia Show. My name is Duck Washington. I will be the host for you on the Encyclopedia Show. Ooh, the screen is bodingly coming down behind me. Just awesome, because we have a little bit of a PowerPoint presentation that's going to happen a little bit later. But before then, out of curiosity, how many people have ever seen the Encyclopedia Show before? Awesome. It's a show that's actually done in cities around the world where each performance we take a different encyclopedia topic and we give that topic to a group of artists of various disciplines to come back and present something based on that. We don't really censor or anything what they do. We don't have an idea of what they're going to perform until they bring it to you live on stage. And today's topic, we gave the performers the topic of festivals. It seemed appropriate for Fearless Fest, so we have 5 performers who've created unique pieces based on festivals. One of the things that's unique about the Encyclopedia Show is we have a wonderful aspect that is the Encyclopedia Show fact checker. I'd like to introduce tonight's fact checker, Reverend Matthew Kesson. Matthew, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
We always love having you here as co-producer.
But yes, it's nice for me to be here, and I'm co-producing it. Yeah.
Can I have you go into a little bit of depth into what exactly your role is in the Encyclopedia Show?
I can go into a lot of depth. What my role in the Encyclopedia Show is to keep everyone honest. These are generally presentations that are in some way based on information, and it is my job to not be able to do this, but rather to judge the truths and the lies that they tell. And these can be both factual truths, actual science truths, or they can be spiritual truths. And so too can they be incorrect things that are provably wrong, or they can be emotionally wrong. And I am uniquely equipped to judge these things because I say so.
All right. So our goal as a show, and sometimes we actually succeed, is that at the end, that Mr. Kesson has tallied more truths in our performance than lies in our performance.
Yes, I count them.
So I'm sure we are up to the challenge. We have we have a group of amazing performers that are going to give education-based entertainments. Are you ready to be edutained? All right. Well, it is time for us to bring up our first presenter. I am honored and thrilled. He's one of my favorite performers in town. Last year, I got to see him do a solo show for the first time in the Minnesota Fringe Festival. Please welcome to the stage, Kyle Decker, everyone.
All right. Hello, everyone. I was looking at the topic of festivals, and I've been a street performer at the Renaissance Festival for a long time, so I thought maybe I'll do something on that. And then I went on a family vacation this year to Disneyland for our first family vacation since pre-COVID. And there was a, thank you. I'm like, where's the button? I am tall. All right. And the usual stuff. My kid was wowed by Star Wars Galaxy's Edge, and to be frank, so was I. But the thing that has stuck with me the most was something that's not curated by Disneyland, and that's a little species called the chorus corvac, or the common raven. They almost went nearly extinct in the United States thanks to progress of civilization, at least mostly on the East Coast. They went nearly completely extinct, and in the Midwest. The crow is more common here in the Midwest than the raven. But on the West Coast, or on the Western United States, there's a population explosion, and some ecologists estimate the raven population in the Western United States in the last 40 years has increased by 700%. Yeah, and part of that reason is the population growth since the 1950s out west and the explosion of corporate agriculture has created what they call these places called subsidies for ravens. So large areas of standing water for corporate cattle farms and garbage collection everywhere in suburbs, huge spanning suburbs everywhere from like Utah, the Pacific Northwest, all along the California coast. And then lots of tall buildings built to have natural roosts and rests that protect ravens from their predators. And so ravens are now thriving in the American West to a potentially problematic level, as in they're important to the ecology, but as anything in ecology, too much of a balance throws it off. So they're trying to find non-lethal ways. They almost removed them from the Migratory Bird Protection Act so they could just slaughter them. And then someone goes, that might be a bad idea. We've tried that in the past. It usually doesn't work and creates new problems. So they're trying non-lethal ways to do it. So why do I bring up ravens and with the introduction of Disneyland? Well, if you've been to Disneyland in Anaheim, which happens to be in the American West, every evening at sunset, tens of thousands of ravens descend upon Disneyland each and every night. They fill the trees and the rooftops of Main Street, USA. If you've been to Disneyland, Main Street, USA is this nice ideal of a fictional land of a walkable American city filled with trolleys and trains, public transportation, and shops that aren't closed up, nor big box stores, unless you consider everything opened by Disney is a big box in and of itself. It's carefully curated and everything. So in this cacophony of birds every evening, you have the happiest place on earth surrounded by a large group of ravens, which those of you who are Corvid fans know a large group of ravens is called an unkindness. And to have the happiest place on earth juxtaposed with an insanely large unkindness every night thrilled me, because just to look up, like, there were so many, they would blot out the sunset at times. Like, these small clouds of, like, you couldn't see, it just looked like a morass of specks. And I kept thinking, it was like, why are they descending upon Disneyland? But also, why are they only on Main Street, USA? Because as you go further in the park, you don't see them in Frontierland. You certainly don't see them in Star Wars Galaxy's Edge or other parts of the park. They seem to stay just in Main Street, USA, which is wild to me. Is like, how can Disney control nature? Disney controls the media. Disney controls what most artists can do and everything. And Disney controls a lot of the IP laws in the United States. They can't control ravens. And they thought, yeah, hell yeah, they can. Disney can control everything. And so I spent this trip thinking about all the machinations these Disney engineers probably came up with to wage war against the encroachment of ravens. And my mind went wild with ideas of them pumping the sound of maybe their natural predators, or, clockwork or automatons of all kinds that Disney is known to do, whether it be ravens or eagles or hawks or anything. They realized, well, maybe they just negotiate with the ravens, because ravens are very smart and threaten to show them montages of the crow scenes in Dumbo over and over again. And you were like, hey, Kyle, those are crows, not ravens. Isn't that scene in Dumbo a little racist? Well, yeah. It's kind of the whole point. But anyway, I also realized the reason they probably try and keep them Main Street, USA is it's kind of their own warfare with the ravens, because then they get to torture them with the barbershop quartets that are always there at Disneyland doing your Disney staples, and then the torture part comes in is when they do Randy Newman songs. Because if you haven't heard a Randy Newman song done by a barbershop quartet at Disneyland, it's a new kind of torture, man. I'm not friends with any of those folks, So I was just thinking about this immaculate thing, but at the end of the day, like with everything Disney, the thing about Disneyland, I was last there in 2002, so it'd been a long time. Disneyland has changed just a little bit in 2 decades, right? And my kid had a blast. He was really only interested in Star Wars. He has no nostalgia for a lot of the old Disney animated shows, which is what Disneyland, especially instead of Disney World, really obsesses with. Disneyland is a carefully curated experience that sells nostalgia for an America that never existed to you. It's the careful colonists, the noble Indian, which they still say Indian at Disneyland, all their exhibits, which is really great in the year of our Lord 2023. You just kind of go, whoa, they're just still going with that. That's great, you go, Disney. But I think it's one of the most honest experiences you can actually have in a theme park in this late capitalism society, because you have this repackaged nostalgia that is mostly a lie, but it's still a really good time because the Disney Imagineers are really flipping good at what they do, right? It's still immaculate. Everything is planned there. You're immersed. It's fun, except for the lines. The lines are never fun. And the idea of an unkindness of ravens greeting you as you exit or enter the park at sunset every night made me think, and how kind of beautiful this confluence of nature and capitalism and family fun and vacation is. And at night, we are leaving each night from the park and hearing the cacophony of the ravens, which were just, you couldn't ignore it no matter what you did, while kids and people who had built or bought their lightsabers are walking around glowing them at night and reflecting off Mickey Mouse ears of every shape and kind that people either made or purchased themselves. And I thought, looked at every smile on the face and how fun I was having with my family, our first vacation in like 4 years, and how appropriately American and modern it was to have all this fun, adventure, and excitement surrounded by a huge unkindness. And that's all I got for you today.
Give it up for Kyle Decker, everybody. Kyle Decker. Ah, yes. Yes, I love it. You know that we have lots of bird explosions in populations that are due to people. One of my favorite stories is the European starling only exists in the United States and exists in all of the 48 continuous states because some idiot saw Shakespeare in the park in New York, in Central Park, and went, I think all the birds that you hear mentioned in Shakespeare should be here. So they brought a set of starlings from Europe to Central Park, and now they're like one of the largest invasive species that we have.
Yeah.
But enough about the starling. What did you think of the Kyle?
Well, the Kyle was excellent as always. The Kyle is always doing good work, and is just doing better and better in work, and I enjoyed it very much. But whether I enjoyed it is irrelevant to the truth and the lies. Now, he started off by saying that he is tall. No, he isn't. So that's a lie. He then said that raven populations in the West have gone up by 700%, and this is true. I know this because I keep perfect track of the rise and fall in population of every single animal in North America. So good work on you there. He said that raven populations were coming up to a problematic level. This is not. This is false, because ravens are awesome, and if the world were entirely shrouded in ravens, that would be the best. He did say it was a bad idea to slaughter them, and that is true, though he did not mention that it is a bad idea to slaughter them because of their vengeance. It is true that a group of ravens is called an unkindness, which is another part of the reason that they're awesome. He did say, though he qualified it later, but he nevertheless did say Disney controls ravens, and that is not true. And these were all factual truths and lies. There was one emotional truth and one emotional lie. The emotional truth was that he proposed that Disney control the ravens by, just in passing, he proposed that Disney control the ravens by unleashing automatons on them. And the automaton raven wars are one of the greatest emotional truths I've ever heard in my life. I need that to happen yesterday. That is wonderful. He also did, and then he referred to the Disney people as Imagineers, which is technically true, but emotionally hurts me. So we got a lie. So we are starting off even. 4 truths and 4 lies.
All right, give it up one more time for Kyle. And now it's time for us to jump to our next performer. The next performer is one of my favorite people. I actually met her, I believe, the very first time I performed at the Encyclopedia show, which was the second Encyclopedia show that we ever did here in Minneapolis. She's talented. She sometimes tells stories, sometimes dances in mascot costumes. I have no idea what she's doing today. Please welcome to the stage the amazing Natalie Ray Wass.
Hello. Let me give you more of my eyes. Okay. I care a lot about doing things right. And I know I'm here among some kind of pedantic people. So I did a little research on, what festivals really are to be accurate for you, and found that they are a tremendously varied bunch. A celebration, with seemingly endless possible subjects. Really, you can have daffodils, grease, baby jumping, mud. You can just celebrate whatever. Baby jumping, do look it up. It literally is a devil man, jumping over babies. They do it every year. That's the other thing, is that you have to do this at intervals, whatever you're celebrating. So the through line would seem to be that the attendees agree to uplift the subject in question. At a convention, you would discuss, and search for best practices with regard to your area of mutual interest. A fair, that you got displays of an educational or competitive nature. But though a festival, may incorporate comparison and prizes, the crux is we get together to remind ourselves of our enthusiasm for the festival's focus. So it's about building community, which, you gotta love it. So it got me to thinking, what were the festivals of my youth? And what were we agreeing to celebrate? As a child, my dad worked on an American base in northern England while we lived in the local community, and I went to British school. And the biggest festival the base threw every year was the 4th of July celebration. And the base brought a full complement of carnival rides, bands, and food. The day culminated in a huge militaristic fireworks display, usually with grids on which, you'd have boats and tanks just kind of burning with fireworks and firing at one another in a not at all phallic way. While patriotic American anthems blared. And I loved it. And individuals with access to the base could bring an English friend or two with them, but it wasn't open to the general British community. So my folks would allow me to bring a British friend along, and in the weeks leading up to the 4th of July, I became uncharacteristically popular. Because my English friends were vying to be the chosen one. And it was confusing for a kid who, really tried to kind of get along with everyone. And I didn't have great luck finding that one best friend, to have the obvious choice. So sometimes I made bad choices and would bring popular kids who didn't necessarily actually want to hang out with me. But life goes on. My dad likes to recount a tale from one 4th of July where he was sitting near a British guy at the bar on the base, and the British guy leans over and goes, what are we celebrating exactly? And my dad, always diplomatic, responded, our freedom from the grinding heel of British oppression. And the man paused before raising a glass and saying, I'll drink to that. Because you can say a lot of things about the English, but you cannot deny their sense of humor. And perhaps it was just a bit weird to have your biggest annual festival be a celebration of independence from the country that was hosting you. Now, my favorite of the British celebrations was Bonfire Night, also known as Guy Fawkes Day, a giant community bonfire accompanied by a potluck and sparklers. It was on November the 5th, and it commemorates a bunch of Catholics' failure to commit treason in 1605. by burning the gunpowder plot's poster child Guy in effigy on that huge bonfire. And the effigy, you just call him the Guy, capital G. So, this is considerably better than the punishment that Guy Fawkes himself was intended to receive. He was supposed to be hung, drawn, and quartered. I say intended because he actually died during the hanging part, which was embarrassing for his torturers, who were supposed to just bring him to the brink of death and then, tie him to a plank and have a horse draw him to the site of the rest of his torture, which also was intended to happen while he was alive. Having his genitals cut off, disemboweling him, cutting his head off, and then cutting him into 4 pieces, which would be distributed around the country for display to dissuade, other would-be traitors. At some point, presumably, he would have died before they got to the end, but... and as a child, I loved watching him burn. But, children are fascists, and we love black and white thinking. Good guys and bad guys. And then they're figuring out the basics. They haven't, got that layering and nuance. So as an adult, although I am still generally anti actually exploding the Houses of Parliament with gunpowder, because I hate to see beautiful architecture destroyed, it's a little easier for me to see Guy's point of view. It had to be tough being Catholic in a country that had basically outlawed your religion on a whim because the king wanted a divorce. And they refused to back down and just let you live your life even several monarchs later, because, why? I also love May Day, celebrating summer and fertility, centered around a specially erected pole, festooned with ribbons, all very tasteful, danced around by small children. But it was nothing like the fertility festival I later attended in Japan, where I found myself just cheering along with a crowd at a parade and street fair featuring huge, and we're talking 10 feet, anatomically accurate sculptural phalluses held aloft and carried down the street, banners, and of course cartoony salt and pepper shakers, so you can purchase your own to take home as well. And there were some boobs. There were. Mostly in the salt and pepper shaker selections, as I recall. But not a lot of, pregnant bellies or depictions of, ovaries or the other items you might need for actual fertility to take you anywhere. But maybe they were there, and I was just so surprised by the penises at that particular time in my life, I didn't notice them. And maybe I'm thinking too deeply about it. No person or culture or celebration is perfect, and I'm all for striving to improve, and I'm also glad that in a fractured world, we can still get together and hold up our phallic sculptures and our phallic substitutes and have a party. Thank you.
Give it up for Natalie, everyone. Children are fascists.
Children are fascists.
I think that it rings even truer knowing that Natalie is often found working at Nickelodeon Universe.
Yeah, no, Natalie would know. Absolutely. Absolutely. Yes, yes.
So what did you think of Natalie's performance there, Mr. Kessler?
Again, wonderful, very, very informative, and very informative. So a number of truths. I don't know whether baby jumping really exists, but it's certainly an emotional truth, and I feel very positive about that. I am going to be Googling it within the hour. The explosions, the fireworks displays at the army base were, truthfully, as you say, not at all phallic. But happily, you did bring in some phallic information later on. So that helped out. So that's the truth as well. The celebration of the Catholics' failure to commit treason, that is of course true, and children are fascists is extremely true. However, couple of lies. You said that Guy Fawkes probably would have died of one of the various things that happened to him afterwards. We don't know that. A lot of people survive getting their head cut off. So yes, you stated that you were confused that there weren't also pictures of pregnancy and giant ovaries in amongst the enormous depictions of penises. And the thing is, I mean, giant ovary depictions would be gross, Natalie. Not like the penises. So that's a lie. And then you said that you were surrounded by, and then you looked meaningfully at me while you said that some people here were pedantic, and so that got a great big giant lie. It still only counts as one, but it's extra big, as you can see. So we're now at 8-7. So the truth is pulled ahead, but only just a little. Yeah.
Give it up one more time for Natalie. I was going to raise this, but I don't think I think that's just going to make it more difficult for our next performer, who is someone who is one of our most regular performers at the Encyclopedia show, and I'm always really excited to see what they bring. I'm also excited. I believe that they have a play that they wrote that's going to be on stage later today, I think. Maybe it's tomorrow, I'm not quite sure. But please, everyone, give a huge round of applause to the amazing Tom S.T.
First of all, I appreciate you leaving the mic at perfect Tom height. And it is true, it is very true. In less than an hour, there will be a live table read of a new production called The McScottish Play. It is about a group of college students trying to put on the Scottish play. Everything is going wrong. Hopefully hilarity ensues, so please stick around for that. All right, so when I was asked to speak on the topic of festivals, the first story that I'm gonna tell you immediately came to mind. So what I have for you today are 3 short-ish anecdotes on the time I spent teaching. Teaching's probably a strong word, and I'll explain why in a minute. But teaching English in Japan for a semester my senior year of college. So the first thing, I haven't thought about this in like 10 years, and I also realized that it's been 10 years since I've been there. I really need to get back. So basically, the background you need for this story is the first one I already told you is I taught English in Japan for a semester. And my parents are just the hugest Star Trek nerds. I love them dearly. So I was living with them at the time, because it's summer break before college. And before I left, they showed me an episode of the original series of Star Trek called Return of the Archons. Yeah, fans of the show probably know where I'm going with this. But for those of you not versed in TOS Star Trek or Star Trek TOS, the one with William Shatner is what I'm trying to say. So if you're not familiar with the show or this episode, this is all you need to know. The first part of the plot is basically just like the purge in space. People are allowed to like give into their most violent, depraved impulses, and just like there's just pandemonium. Like there's fires. There's a bit in the beginning where the crew of the Enterprise they're being asked by this person. I think the first thing they notice is like there's weird like 19th century clothes. Like there's a whole aesthetic going on. It's like a whole like old-fashioned aesthetic, and they keep getting asked if they're in town for the festival. And then later on, during the above-mentioned purge in space. In the midst of like fires and looting, somebody yells, "Festival! All crazed and hysterical, and that's basically all I remember about the episode. And that was a problem when I started my first day in this English classroom, because guess what? Their first unit that I walked into was an English class unit on the Sapporo Snow Festival, so it's like just like talking about something familiar in an unfamiliar language, basically. And of course, one of the practice phrases in the unit was, "Are you in town for the festival?" And I'm not sure I can impress upon you the amount of willpower it took not to burst out yelling, "Festival, festival!" in a classroom full of Japanese middle schoolers. I mean, my Japanese is okay. I just don't know if I'd be able to explain all of the nuance and like all of the backstory to get them to explain why I'm just losing it in the middle of a classroom of kids. And the English teachers wanted me to speak English in the classroom, so that, I can't really do that. I may have giggled to myself, though. Actually, something the kids did find funny is, like, so I am from the Midwest. I'm not proud of it, but I'll move on if you're ready to forgive me, I suppose. So I was just like absolutely gobsmacked by the sight of the mountains. And it's a mountain, it's also a dormant volcano, which I find very cool. So I should explain before I go forward. So we could see this dormant volcano from the school windows. This mountain was called Mount Iwate because I was in Iwate Prefecture. That's in the northwest of the main Honshu Island, not up in Hokkaido. So a little further south than that. But so they have so it's a dormant volcano or a mountain named Mount Iwate. It's also called Nambu Fuji, which is the Fuji of the Northwest. Quick sidebar, I think that's a bit like calling Carleton College the Harvard of the Midwest. Yeah, it's not like the Harvard, but it's a Harvard. But anyway, so I had to explain when the kids were like, just thought it was super hilarious that it was like, oh my God, Gandalf Mountains! I couldn't say that either because I can't, how do you explain The Hobbit and like mountains and just that whole thing? Again, language barrier. So I had to explain that I don't have mountains and I have to do the mountain gesture just to make sure. And then I have to explain that where I come from, it's all flat like this. So they did find that hilarious. And so I say like teaching English was a bit of a strong word because I say that because like I wasn't really teaching, I was more just like a human tape recorder. I just read practice phrases from their textbook because they wanted to hear an authentic American accent. And here's my little nerdy linguistics brain going, but you're only hearing a regional dialect. I'm not like I don't represent all Americans or even all English for that matter, but that's a subject for another time. They also did this thing, and this is pretty common in English classrooms where they'd listen to a pop song and they'd have these worksheets. They have to fill in the blanks for the words, which is genuinely a good way to learn a different language. But it did lead to an awkward moment when the teacher picked Honesty by Billy Joel and was like, you know this song, right? No, I don't. I think the only Billy Joel song I know is Piano Man. And yeah, I did not, this was before the whole like, hey, Piano Man's funnier if you read it as the only straight guy in a gay bar. So besides being a human tape recorder, she did want me to be more involved, so she asked me to talk about American holidays, or you might call them festivals. And that's how I got to terrify a bunch of middle schoolers by showing them the historically accurate jack-o'-lanterns. Do you know the ones? Yeah, okay, somebody knows that I'm talking about the ones that are carved from turnips. And you would not think that a turnip could be horrifying. But if you look these up, I promise they're the stuff of nightmares. I suppose it could have been worse. I could have been yelling, festival, festival! Which I'm glad I didn't do. That would have been awful. The last story I'll relay to you is not a festival that I was teaching about, but since it's a cultural exchange, you're there to learn as well. And there is a fall festival that happens in the prefecture I was in, where we carry around this big, like, essentially a portable shrine. It's called a mikoshi. So we're carrying it, and it's a bunch of junior and senior college students with a bunch of guys who were like tattooed up to here, and I'm like, you're pretty sure they're Yakuza. Like, nobody says it. It's all kind of kept under wraps, but they're Japanese mafia. And there was even one who was a tattoo artist who knew our group leader who lived there, and she was like, I don't want to be seen with you. That sort of thing. But yeah, so we're doing that. We carry it, I think, about 2 miles, and we have to walk back. And then there was this community center where they gave us, they kind of fed us, and then they also gave us like, was it beer and tea mixed with, I think, like their vodka equivalent. It's called shochu. Yeah, shochu. Basically, essentially similar to vodka. And that's sorry. Just like, that's the worst thing to be given, worst and best thing to be given when you've been walking in the humidity for like miles. That's basically all I had for you, so thank you for listening.
Give it up for Tom! Awesome. I thought it was pretty great, but what do I know?
No.
They may be wrong for all I know, but they may be right.
Quite so.
What did you think of Tom's
That was a
performance?
Billy Joel reference, everybody. Okay, one very, very educational as always, very delightful as Tom always is. But as far as truths or lies are concerned, here are the facts. You started off by talking shit about the Midwest, which I felt was a bold choice. So you got a truth for that. You say the only Billy Joel song you know is Piano Man, and in fact, Piano Man is the only Billy Joel song. So you got a truth for that. You sort of implied that the Sapporo Festival and the Return of the Archons were sort of corresponded to each other, and I'm afraid that is a lie. You said that it is difficult to explain The Hobbit to Japanese people, but like half of The Hobbit is in a made-up language anyway, so much like Japanese. And because this is post-Trump America, I just need to explain that was an absurd joke rather than something I actually believe. And finally, you said, I don't represent all Americans. Yes, you do, Tom. Give yourself some credit. So that's 2 truths and 3 lies, putting us at a dead heat. Oh, it's tense, Duck. Duck Washington, it is tense. Yes.
Scary.
Very
But thanks.
scary.
Let's give it up for Tom. And I think we want to jump right into our next performer. This next performer is one of the people I'm honored to get to partner with on a lot of different projects. He is in a group called Vilification Tennis that I'm also in. He'll be performing that in it tonight. And I will not, because I will be here like a true Fearless Comedy Productions member. No, please give it up for Kelvin Hotley, everyone.
Eel pouts. What does this ridiculous fish, which looks like a mad scientist's cross between an eel and a catfish, have to do with the town of Walker, Minnesota? Or more generally, what does this ridiculous fish have to do with anything? What is the Walker Eel Pout Festival? And perhaps more importantly, why is the Walker Eel Pout Festival? Well, I am going to try to elucidate that. First of all, I should probably explain just what an eel pout is. And the first thing you should know, that's not actually an eel pout. This is an eel pout. True eel pouts are actually a marine fish of the scientific family Zoarcidae. This example is specifically Bothrocara bruneum, or more colloquially, the 2-line eel pout. And it lives in the northern reaches of the Pacific Ocean from about the Bering Sea down as far south as Bay Area of California. What Minnesotans refer to as an eel pout is actually the freshwater fish Loda iota, which is more commonly known as a burbot. And this can be found throughout the northernmost parts of the northern hemisphere, throughout the world, mostly in North America and Europe. They are also known as a bubbot, a moria, a loche, a cusk, the freshwater cod, the freshwater ling, the freshwater cusk, coney fish, ling cod, and my personal favorite, the lawyer. I saw that and I thought, okay, someone's having a little fun editing Wikipedia, but that is also the name, a name mentioned on the Minnesota Department of Natural Resources page, so I guess it is literally called a lawyer in some places. So that must be legit, but I guess the burbot and the eel pout kind of look and act alike, at least to like early Scandinavian immigrants. They both sort of look like eels. They're both bottom-feeding fish, and they both inhabit like the northerly freshwaters, which is maybe why, well, northerly waters, I should say, which is maybe why someone decided to call them the same thing. But by the way, neither eel pouts nor burbots are very closely related to eels. The burbot is actually more closely related to the cod, which is interestingly enough the only freshwater species to be related to the cod. And they can also get pretty big. Okay, sorry to confuse the bejesus out of everyone right out of the gate, but I shall not be talking about the genuine eel pouts anymore. I'll be referring to the burbot as an eel pout for the rest of my presentation, in the interests of clarity and Minnesota centricism. Eel pout liver and roe are considered delicacies in Finland. And it is an exceptionally nutritious fish. Eel pout livers contain 3 to 4 times the potency in vitamin D and 4 to 10 times the potency of vitamin A than cod liver oil. Yeah, many consider eel pout to taste similar to lobster. So in addition to all those other names I've mentioned, it is also sometimes called the poor man's lobster. And it can be enjoyed in a traditional Minnesota beer battered fried form as well. It was also commonly used as animal feed. Way back in Elizabethan England, it was used as a hog feed. And furriers used it to feed foxes, as it resulted in a more luxurious, higher quality fur. So if you're ever interested in a fox fur coat, first, why? Fur is really mean, people. It's cruel, it's terrible. But secondly, you know, if you have to have a fox fur coat, try and find one that's been fed eel pout, because they're going to have it's going to be a well-fed fox, and it'll be nice fur. Okay, enough science. What about the festival? What was it about Walker, Minnesota that led it to hold such a thing in honor of this rough, bottom-feeding fish? I don't have exact evidence of this, but I would imagine it's similar to other eccentric festivals thrown in small towns all over the world. They were really, really bored. It's the middle of winter, it's 15 below out, and everyone is losing their minds. Also, they were probably really, really broke. Walker is a town of less than 1,000 people per the 2020 census, and it also serves as the county seat of Cass County. Like, I didn't know a county seat could be that small. And they had to monetize something, you know, get some tourists in, and, you know, generate a little tax revenue so you could possibly fill all the potholes and all the county roads and all those other things they're supposed to fund. Through local government services. So why hold it in the dead of winter? I mean, if you're going to have an eel pout festival, why in the dead of winter? Why not in the summer, you know, when, you know, people want to be outside? Well, there's a couple good reasons for that. A big one is that eel pout spawn in the winter, which is pretty unusual in the fish world. Winter is really when they're most active. They go at it in these big, massive thrashing clumps like this. And also, as a rough bottom-feeding fish, eel pout are pretty well suited for ice fishing. There aren't any fancy lures or rods you need. You know, you just slap some live bait on a hook, stick a bobber to the line, drop it in the hole, and then you can safely ignore the line, crack open the thermos for a cup of joe, and go back to complaining about the kids these days. But really, I mean, wasn't there anything else Walker, Minnesota could trumpet? You know, well, I mean, other than the Eel Pout Festival, the only other noteworthy thing about Walker I was able to uncover was that it's the hometown of Ernest Hemingway's wife. And, you know, hey, good for Mary Welsh Hemingway for being from someplace. You know? But it makes sense to me that they went with the eel pouts, is what I'm saying. The first Eel Pout Festival was held on January the 12th, 1980. Sponsored by Walker Drug and the Tackle Box, which I believe was a bait shop of some kind. It really wasn't much more than an ice fishing contest, you know, but that would change over time. I like down here on the bottom where it says, for those not skilled enough to catch the elusive eel pout, prizes will be awarded for the largest walleye, which I thought was kind of kind of them. Again, the ice fishing contest would change. It would get bigger over time. The Eel Pout Festival continued with a bit of a hiccup in 2016 and 2017 when motor vehicles were prohibited on Leech Lake because they had thinner ice due to warmer than usual temperatures. So yes, outdoorsmen, climate change is real and it does affect your hobby. You know, maybe we should do something about that, huh? Okay. So the festival grew and grew and grew. Other events were added to the festival, my particular favorite being eel pout curling. I mean, that's some ingenuity right there. Eventually, this event would attract an estimated 10,000 people, all out there on Leech Lake fishing for eel pout. At least theoretically, they were fishing for eel pout. You see, an additional element slowly gained in importance as the festival went on. At some point, they included an ice bar. They carved a big bar out of ice, put it on the lake, and included that in the event, so there was some drinking. Actually, there was a lot of drinking. A lot of drinking. So, unfortunately, the Eel Pout Festival fell victim to the usual problems of similar events, overpopularity and jerks. It was announced on January the 2nd, 2020, that the Eel Pout Festival would not be held. Festival organizers could not come up with an agreement with Cass County officials on various issues, primarily garbage pickup. You know, when 10 times the population of your town shows up for a weekend, you know, they're going to generate some refuse. And Cass County just wasn't able to cope with it all anymore. Think for a couple seconds about the logistical difficulties of removing trash from a frozen lake. You might be able to get a garbage truck out there, but would you really want to risk that? And given the legendary unpredictability of Minnesota weather, the frozen surface of the lake can get slushy, you know, and then refreeze. So now you've got who knows how many beer cans and dead minnows and Cheetos bags and even entire ice houses frozen into the lake. You know, that crap is just going to sit there until the spring thaw, and then it's going to fall right into the Leech Lake, and no one wants that. I mean, not the DNR, not the outdoorsman, no one wants that amount of garbage thrown into a lake. However, one other possible wrinkle came from the DNR later, which could impact future festivals. In 2022, the eel pout was reclassified from a rough fish, meaning we do not care how many of these things you take out of the lake, please just get them the hell out of there, make some room for the cool fish. And it got reclassified as a game fish. So now there is a limit of 10 eel pouts per day that can be taken, which may dampen the enthusiasm of the more serious, volume-focused angler. There was an attempt to move the festival over to Lake Bemidji, a much smaller lake to the northwest of Leech Lake, but the city of Bemidji and Beltrami County were like, nuh-uh. So instead, festival organizers threw something they called the Frozen Block Party. Again, you might guess from the sponsors being Absolute and Jameson, they were pretty much ditching the whole fish angle in favor of just full-on unapologetic drinking. It just wasn't the same. It just wasn't the same. So the Eel Pout Festival was no more. Or was it? On January 27th of this year, festival organizers teased a return of the festival on Facebook. It got 1,200 like and love responses, 207 shares, and 847 comments, which suggests there's still a lot of interest in this event. In addition, many of those commenters offered suggestions on how to restructure the festival into less of a raucous bacchanal, as well as general calls for attendees to be good citizens, clean up after themselves, and just not turn the whole thing into a drunken shit show. So the Eel Pout Festival may yet return. The love for this so ugly it's cute fish remains, and they're still out there swimming under the ice, waiting to be some poor man's lobster. But someone other than me will be catching them. I mean, come on, it's cold out there.
Give it up for Calvin, everybody. Awesome. He just looks like someone who would be talking about
He
Eel
does,
Pout.
yeah, absolutely.
What did you think of Calvin's performance
Well,
there?
obviously it was loaded with facts, a lot of extremely important, exciting facts, and not at all pedantic. And so he got 3 points for that, and he got 1 point for saying why the Eel Pout Festival. I mean, obviously, why the Eel Pout Festival. And then at one point after the fact, he said, that's enough science, and so he got a giant lie for that. So we're at 13 to 12. So again,
All
close,
right.
very close.
All right, we're running out of time, so I want to bring the next performer up right away. Please give it up for Philip Andrew Bennett Lowe.
Yeah, we're good. Sweet poison. I don't know what it is, but it's blue and it's got glowing shit in it, and poison's right in the name, so I assume it's gotta have high alcohol content, right? One gulp and I feel like I might jizz out a clump of overpriced cotton candy. One of the things I resent about this place is that I can't even guzzle a goddamn honest adult beverage that looks and sounds like what it is. But it'll have to do. See, this is my first time at Walt Disney World. The planet's longest running non-stop festival, and I'm about to go on the Twilight Zone themed Tower of Terror. Now, this is significant because I had a panic attack on the Toy Story flying saucers. I hate rides. I actually used to enjoy them back before I was a bundle of neuroses, but I haven't been on a fast ride since the Clinton administration. With the possible exception of some Uber drivers who might say, to paraphrase Oscar Wilde, I don't drive accurately, anyone can drive accurately, but I drive with wonderful expression. So, the Tower of Terror sounds like an experience I do not want to have, being strapped into a box and violently shaken while a pre-recorded video constructs some sort of clumsy narrative around the experience. However, I do fucking love the Twilight Zone. So, I don't want to do this, but I don't want to not have done this. I'm not a Disney guy. And I'm also not a gatekeeper, and I begrudge no one loving the thing that they love. I admire the artistry of many of the movies, but ultimately, I am just the worst kind of snob. Fact.
Yeah, no, yeah.
Yeah, right? I actually really do love fairy and folk tales, and the studio has a tendency to file off the interesting bits to hammer them into their house formula. Not to mention that their sugary sense of whimsy tends to leave me nauseous. I do sort of admire the theme park spirit of hyperactive capitalism, but the attempt to produce a live-action cartoon around you creates for me a disconcerting uncanny valley effect. We're currently at the China Pavilion in Epcot, and my mother-in-law burbles happily that this is just like the Forbidden City. Ma'am, I've been to the Forbidden City. Here, everything looks like it's made out of plastic. The speakers are piping in pre-recorded pipa music. I'm holding a cardboard carton filled with burnt shredded beef, drowning in sickly sweet red sauce that makes an Arby's beef and cheddar look like a porterhouse steak. I would have said that it makes an Arby's beef and cheddar look like filet mignon, but nothing can make an Arby's beef and cheddar look like filet mignon. I glance around at the gangly white kids in patty hats. I mean, I don't blame them. It's hot, and the underlying design principle is sound. I've always responded to cultural appropriation with more bemusement than offense, so I'm not offended. Exactly. I mean, I'm glad that this place exists. I'm glad that people are interested in it. I'm glad that it brings them joy. I don't begrudge anyone that, but by the same token, it does feel a little surreal to see your family turned into a cartoon. The food stands at Epcot were sold to me as a profound cultural experience. But I was one of those kids lucky enough to get to travel a lot growing up. So it's hard for me not to look around and think, if you're gonna save up to eat sickly sweet red sauce at the China Pavilion in Epcot, why wouldn't you just save up to eat in, China? Walt's globalist vision of being able to walk down the street indulging in multi-ethnic food and drink feels hilariously dated. I can now get crappy ethnic food at any Panda Express in any shopping mall. My 4-year-old son collapses to the ground, sobbing, "I don't like to be in Florida." I can only look at him and think, dude, I am confident that you are not the first to utter those words. And I keep thinking about my own time in China. It's hard not to, what with the pipa music and all. And one thing feels similar. I hated guided tours. You know, that experience of being taken by the hand and led through a carefully curated experience. The term gamers uses on rails, which, I mean, is what rides literally are. One thing feels different. Now, I remember walking along a series of mountain cliff sides and remarking on the lack of railings. My sister asked the guide, "Don't people fall off and die?" He gave a bored shrug and said, "Yeah, sure." When I expressed intense and repeated concern about the Tower of Terror, everyone talked up how great the storytelling was. So, here is the story. Some equity actor does a Rod Serling impression. The theme song is played. You see a projection of people going into an elevator. Then they vanish. That's not a fucking story! That's just something awful happening. Something awful happening is not a story. Where's the twist? What does that say about the human condition? Where, by God, is the insultingly preachy moral? If this was an episode of The Twilight Zone, this would be a greatly inferior episode of The Twilight Zone. I was also assured that the ride itself was not that bad. I respectfully disagree. We were repeatedly flung up and down. I mostly gripped the underside of the seat and kept repeating, "I don't like to be in Florida." When I was more cogent, I prayed. And to be clear, this was not because I actually believed that God would help me. You know, I do believe in a benevolent creator, but something mysterious ways. You know, meaning if it's my time to go, reciting the Lorica of St. Patrick won't alter his divine purpose. Besides, even I have to admit that being crushed to death by a kitschy tribute to classic sci-fi would be a more perfectly ironic demise than I'm likely to actually get. When I was more cogent than that, which was rare, but still, I recited facts. No guest has ever died on a Disney World ride. They're like elevators built with overlapping safeties and redundancies. If something goes wrong, they don't go haywire, they shut down. If a fucking light bulb breaks, the haunted mansion will leave you staring at an endlessly looping ghost animation until the insurance agent on site lets them start the ride again. The thing is, I do know that I won't die, whatever my lizard brain may be shrieking about what the sensation of falling meant in the ancestral environment. I trust the team that built this. I mean, I don't know them, and I don't know that they care any more about my individual life than the people who built those walkways in China did. For all I know, they are sociopaths who get off on the idea of the brutal deaths of random strangers. But I do trust their self-interest. The reason this organization is so obsessive about safety is because we live in a nation not of men but of laws, and my death would be financially catastrophic. The ride stops, I step out, and I reflect on the truth that I have learned about myself. That I have more faith in free market incentives to preserve my life than I do in a benevolent creator. I stagger back onto solid earth, back into a synthetic candy fever dream, and start looking for another overpriced sugary themed drink. Thank you.
Give it up for Philip Andrew Bennett Lowe, everyone. Mr. Kesson, please tell me a little bit about what you think and how we ended up with the show today.
Justin, we ended up, several solid facts. he's the worst kind of snob. I don't like to be in Florida. That's not a fucking story. All of these absolutely facts. But only one untruth, which was actually another fact was for when you said the thing about porterhouse steaks and Arby's. Like the entire offstage group screamed and laughed, and that gets the truth. Only one falsity, which is I don't begrudge anyone in Disney World. Yes, you do, as is evidenced by the rest of your talk. But anyway, that brings us to 17 to 13, and truth, thank heaven, wins again.
All right. Thank you so much. Give a round of applause to all of our performers. This has been the Encyclopedia Show. Please stay and watch the next show, which I believe is the improvised Hallmark Bingo quiz show. Thank you so much.